You wake up before the sun, you skip breakfast, you check your phone and it's already buzzing with problems that aren't yours, but you'll fix them anyway. You punch in early, stay late, say yes when you're already drowning. You take pride in your discipline. You were raised on the belief that doing the right thing matters, that effort is noble, that sacrifice earns respect. You were told, work hard, follow the rules, keep your head down, and eventually you'll be rewarded. And yet, here you are, exhausted, underpaid, ignored. Watching someone with half your experience, half your effort, and none of your integrity climb the ladder faster. They talk a big game, they network. They cut corners, take credit, and somehow always end up in the spotlight. You don't hate them. You just don't understand how someone who does less ends up with more. You look in the mirror and ask yourself quietly, what did I miss? But maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the real question is, what lie did I inherit? See, from the very beginning you were trained to believe that the world is fair, that good people rise, that hard work is a ladder and all you need to do is keep climbing. But what if that ladder leads nowhere? What if it was placed there to keep you occupied, not to help you rise? Friedrich Nietzsche didn't see hard work as inherently virtuous. He saw it as a form of control, a kind of moral leash handed to the obedient. In his view, most people don't work because they love it. They work because they've been trained to feel guilty if they don't, because they're terrified of being seen as lazy, selfish, or worse, ungrateful. This isn't just a mindset, it's a system, a spiritual trap wrapped in moral language. You were never taught how power works. You were taught how obedience works. And obedience, when it's disconnected from strategy, becomes a cage that looks like virtue. We romanticize the blue-collar backbone of the world, the nurse on the double shift, the janitor who never calls in sick, the trucker who crosses 3 states in a blizzard. And yes, their work is essential. But look closer. Why are they essential and still disposable? Why are the people who keep society alive always the ones just barely surviving? Meanwhile, the people earning millions, are they the hardest workers? Are they grinding until their backs give out? No. They operate from a different map altogether. A map built not on morality, but leverage, not on service, but strategy, not on sacrifice, but ownership. We don't live in a meritocracy, we live in a powerocracy. And that's the brutal truth no one tells you while you're learning how to be a good employee. They told you to value humility, but didn't mention that humility without power turns into silence. They praised your reliability, but forgot to say that predictability makes you easy to replace. They sold you on the myth that good things come to those who wait, but they didn't explain that the ones who wait the longest often die waiting. This is not an attack on work ethic. This is a wake-up call. There's nothing wrong with being a hard worker. The problem is believing that hard work alone is enough. Because the system doesn't reward labor, it rewards leverage. The people who rise aren't always the smartest or most ethical. They're the ones who understand how to navigate the board, who know where the pieces move, who ask, what am I getting for what I give, instead of blindly offering more? This is the betrayal hiding in plain sight. They told you to be loyal, but loyalty without boundaries turns into exploitation. They told you to be grateful, but gratitude without discernment becomes manipulation. And they told you to work hard, but they didn't tell you that in this world, working hard without understanding power is like pouring water into a leaking bucket. No matter how much you give, it never fills. So ask yourself, who does this myth benefit? Who wins when you keep your head down, stay quiet, and grind until you're too tired to ask questions? Who profits from your silence? Who taught you that being seen as good matters more than being free? Nietzsche didn't say to abandon morality. He said, be careful whose morality you're living by. Because often what you call virtue is just submission with good PR. And if you feel exhausted, if you feel like you're doing everything right and still losing, it's not because you're broken. It's because the game was never built to reward you. But here's the thing, once you see it, once you really see the design, you can't unsee it. And that's when your real life begins. Because now the question isn't how do I work harder? The question is, what game am I actually playing? And who designed it? If you're still holding on to the myth that labor equals liberation, it's time we went deeper. Let's pull back the curtain. Let's look at how this illusion of moral labor was engineered, and why millions still cling to it, even as it breaks them. There's a reason this lie is so deeply rooted. It wasn't planted randomly, it was engineered. And it starts long before you ever punch a clock. As a child, you were taught fairy tales, cartoons, morality plays. In every story, the good character suffers, sacrifices, obeys, and eventually gets rewarded. The villain cuts corners, cheats, wins quickly, but loses in the end. And so you believe that life mirrored those stories, that justice was built into the system, that if you just stayed good, life would make sense. Psychologists call this the just world fallacy, the belief that life is inherently fair, that bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people, that suffering is part of a redemptive arc. But here's the truth. There is no universal referee handing out justice. Life isn't a story, it's a system. And systems don't reward morality. They reward function, influence, position, control. And Nietzsche saw this with terrifying clarity. He believed most people live under a morality not designed by them, but for them, crafted by those in power to keep the masses docile, hopeful, and obedient. He called it slave morality. Slave morality doesn't arise from strength. It arises from weakness. It's what the powerless invent to give their powerlessness meaning. When you can't win on the battlefield, you change the rules. You say, maybe losing is noble. You say, maybe suffering makes me good. It's a psychological defense, clever, even compassionate, but it becomes a prison when you forget that you built it to survive. In slave morality, strength becomes arrogance, wealth becomes greed, power becomes corruption, and weakness becomes virtue. Obedience becomes holiness, suffering becomes sainthood. You've heard it. The best people don't want power. But ask yourself, who benefits from a world where the best people never lead? The powerful do. This isn't about demonizing kindness or generosity. It's about asking who profits from your moral paralysis, because that's what it becomes, paralysis. You don't negotiate your salary because it feels selfish. You don't leave a toxic boss because it feels disloyal. You stay quiet because you're afraid of seeming ungrateful, and all the while the system keeps moving, rewarding those who aren't paralyzed, the ones who weren't taught to feel guilty for wanting more. Think about it. The hospital doesn't run without the nurses, but the PR department gets the funding. The roads don't exist without the construction crews, but the developers get the bonuses. The world doesn't move without labor, but labor doesn't move the world. Why? Because the game is rigged to reward those who understand leverage, not just labor. Leverage is the difference between trading your time and owning your outcome. A nurse treats one patient at a time. A hedge fund manager moves millions with a mouse click. Who gets rewarded? Not the one working harder, but the one whose actions scale. And that's the game Nietzsche exposed. A world where the appearance of virtue is used to pacify those who could, if they saw clearly, dismantle the whole system. So what do the powerful do? They praise your loyalty, but never promote you. They reward your sacrifice with applause, not ownership. They give you just enough to keep you showing up, but never enough to walk away. They say, we value you, but they value you most when you're too tired to ask for more. This is the brilliance and cruelty of the lie. It doesn't demand chains, it demands belief. If you believe the system is fair, you won't rebel. You'll wait. You'll wait for your turn. You'll wait for someone to notice. You'll wait for justice, recognition, promotion, deliverance, and someday never comes. Because the system was never built to reward sacrifice. It was built to harvest it. This is why so many people spend decades climbing a ladder only to realize too late it was leaning against the wrong wall. And the pain of that moment, the rage, the grief, the shame, it doesn't come from failure. It comes from betrayal. Betrayal by a story you were told your whole life. A story that said, be good and the world will be good to you. But goodness without power is ignored, and power without goodness becomes cruelty. The solution is not to become ruthless, it's to become aware. Nietzsche's answer wasn't to abandon morality, it was to evolve it, to create a new morality, one born from strength, clarity, and authorship. He called it master morality. Master morality doesn't wait to be told what's right. It defines right. It doesn't seek approval. It moves with purpose. It's not rooted in fear, but in authorship. To live with master morality is to ask, what matters to me and how do I build a life around that? It doesn't mean you abandon kindness or service. It means you stop letting them be used against you. You stop being the workhorse others rely on while they climb. You stop trading your years for a thank you card and a pizza party. You stop worshiping sacrifice as if it's a retirement plan. And you start learning how to play the actual game, the game of leverage, of boundaries, of presence, of power. Not domination, direction, not manipulation, movement, not cruelty, consciousness. Because real freedom isn't found in obedience, it's found in authorship. And real morality? It's not submission, it's sovereignty. If you felt the quiet burn of betrayal in your chest, the sense that something doesn't add up, that maybe you've been tricked into thinking your suffering was sacred, then good. You're not losing your mind, you're waking up. And once you see the lie, the only question left is, will you keep playing the game? Or will you finally start learning how it works? It's one thing to realize the system is broken. It's another to admit it was never built for you. That stings, because it means all the years you spent grinding, believing, staying loyal. It wasn't just a waste, it was the fuel. Your obedience kept the engine running. Your silence kept the machine quiet. Your sacrifice fed someone else's empire. And the worst part? You weren't wrong to believe. You were trained to believe. In school, you were rewarded for following instructions, not questioning them. In church, you were told to serve, not to seek. In your family, you were praised for being responsible, not for being powerful. Every structure in your life taught you the same pattern. Don't rock the boat. Be grateful, be useful, be nice. But nice doesn't build freedom. And usefulness, in this world, is a currency that gets spent, not saved. This is why millions of hardworking people keep ending up in the same place, tired, overwhelmed, wondering why they're so replaceable, wondering why someone else with less integrity, less experience, and less soul keeps getting ahead. Because those people were taught a different lesson, not morality, strategy. They were taught that results matter more than intentions, that positioning beats effort, that relationships move faster than resumes. They understood early that the system doesn't care how much you bleed, it cares what you control. It doesn't reward the person who works the most, it rewards the person who owns the outcome. You can work yourself into the ground and still be stuck, not because you lack value, but because you lack leverage. Let's call it what it is. You were trained to be good. They were trained to be effective, and effectiveness wins. While you're asking, am I being fair? They're asking, is this move going to increase my power? While you're waiting for recognition, they're building alliances. While you're holding on to loyalty, they're analyzing exit strategies. You call it character. They call it leverage. And here's where Nietzsche's insight cuts deep. Most people don't realize they've been moralized into powerlessness. They mistake self-sacrifice for leadership. They confuse obedience with character. They believe that being liked is more important than being effective. So they stay in positions that drain them. They say yes when they should say no. They stay silent when they should speak up. They work overtime hoping to prove their worth to a system that already decided what they're worth. This is what Nietzsche meant when he said slave morality isn't just a belief, it's a survival mechanism. But survival is not the same as liberation. To survive, you obey. To lead, you must question. And questioning is dangerous because it risks the one thing most people cling to more than anything else, being seen as good. That's the final chain, your need to be perceived as righteous, moral, kind, safe, agreeable, the need to be approved of by a system that exploits your decency. But being good is not the same as being free, because if your goodness is defined by how well you obey, it's not virtue, it's programming. Nietzsche didn't ask you to throw away morality. He asked you to outgrow the morality that was designed to keep you weak, to move from inherited values to self-authored ones, to say, I can still be kind, but I will not be used. I can still be generous, but I will not sacrifice my sovereignty. I can still be moral, but I choose the terms of that morality, not the system. Because the moment you wake up to the reality that the game isn't fair, you have two choices. You can complain and stay powerless, or you can study the game and change your position. This is where most people get stuck. They see the truth, but they're afraid of what it asks of them. Because power has a cost. Not the cost of corruption, but the cost of clarity. When you step into power, you lose the comfort of being a victim. You can no longer blame the world entirely. You have to accept responsibility for where you are and where you go next. And that's terrifying. But it's also the only real path forward. Because once you understand that morality without power is exploited, and power without morality is toxic, the only place left to stand is in the middle. In mastery, in ownership, in strategic consciousness. You stop waiting for permission. You stop asking for approval. You stop pretending that being the best worker will make you the most valued, and instead you ask, where does my energy go? Who benefits from my time? What am I building that belongs to me? Because until you ask those questions, you're not working, you're donating, you're not sacrificing, you're surrendering, and no one's going to stop you. They'll praise you, promote you just enough, reward you just enough, recognize you just enough, enough to keep you believing, enough to keep you hoping, enough to keep you tied, but not enough to set you free. That's why so many people stay in the same job for decades, waiting to be seen, waiting to be chosen, waiting to finally be told, you matter, you're valuable, you've earned your place. But the people who rise, they don't wait to be told they matter. They build something that proves it, not for approval, for agency. This is where you turn the corner, not toward bitterness, but toward clarity, not away from morality, but toward a morality that includes power. Because without power, your goodness can't protect you, and without strategy, your effort can't elevate you. So if you're ready to stop waiting, if you're ready to stop being good on someone else's terms, then keep going, because now we get into the how. How to shift from labor to leverage, how to reclaim power without becoming cold, how to use your morality as a compass, not a leash. That's where we go next. Now that the illusion has cracked, you're probably asking the right question for the first time in your life, not, how do I get them to notice me, but how do I stop needing them to? This is where your life starts to shift, because once you stop chasing validation and start building leverage, everything changes. But let's be honest, that first step, it's disorienting. You've spent years, maybe decades, defining yourself by how reliable you were, how moral, how consistent. You were the one who picked up the slack, stayed late, said yes, played by the rules even when the rules burned you. That identity doesn't die quietly. It fights. It says, don't become like them. Don't lose your integrity. And that voice is right, but only halfway. You don't need to become heartless. You need to become strategic. Strategic morality is not a betrayal of your character. It's a maturation of it. It means your goodness is no longer automatic. It's conscious, chosen, directed. Because kindness without awareness isn't virtue, it's vulnerability. Let's say that again. Kindness without awareness is not virtue, it's vulnerability. It's what allows toxic bosses to guilt you into extra shifts. It's what allows manipulative partners to twist your empathy into obedience. It's what keeps you showing up in spaces that drain you, because you've been told it's noble to endure. But endurance is not strength when it's directionless. Endurance becomes strength only when it's aimed at a goal you chose, not one imposed on you. So what does strategic morality actually look like? It looks like choosing where your energy goes instead of bleeding it everywhere out of guilt. It looks like setting boundaries and holding them, even when it makes people uncomfortable. It looks like saying no without explaining, defending, or apologizing for it. It looks like walking away from environments that praise your loyalty but punish your ambition. It looks like asking not, will they like me, but is this worthy of me? That's not selfish. That's called inner leadership. And inner leadership is the first real step toward outer power. You don't need to become manipulative. You need to become aware of manipulation. You don't need to dominate people. You need to stop being dominated by your own guilt. Because guilt is the hook. It's the invisible leash that keeps good people small, keeps you quiet, keeps you waiting. Strategic morality cuts that leash. It says, I can still be good, but I'm no longer predictable. I can still care, but I will not collapse for you. I can still serve, but only in places that serve me back. That's when you become untouchable. Not because you're ruthless, but because you're no longer pliable. This is what Nietzsche meant when he talked about the Übermensch. Not some arrogant conqueror, but someone who creates their own values. Someone who outgrows the moral programming handed down by fear-based systems. You stop being a reaction to the world. You become the author of your role in it. You stop looking for a path to follow and start cutting one through the wilderness yourself. It might mean disappointing people, letting others down, walking away from roles you once prided yourself on. But that's the price of truth. And the reward? Peace. Not comfort. Peace. The quiet confidence of knowing you're living on your terms, not because someone allowed it, but because you decided. Now let's talk practical. This shift isn't about theory, it's about steps. Start with one question. Where am I being used? Not where you're needed, not where you're useful. Where you're used, You'll feel it, that quiet resentment when your phone buzzes, and you already know it's another "can you?" The dread before work, not because the job is hard, but because it's misaligned. The exhaustion that doesn't come from physical labor, but from emotional compromise. Those are your indicators. Next question, where am I overgiving out of fear? Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of not being seen as good. That's the fear slave morality runs on. And until you face it, you can't break free from it. Now here's the third question. What do I want to build? Not for them, for you. A life, a system, a rhythm, a way of being that rewards your values, reflects your strength, and protects your peace. Maybe it's your own business. Maybe it's a career change. Maybe it's finally learning about leverage, money, influence, audience, negotiation. Maybe it's as simple as finally saying no. Whatever it is, understand this, nobody is coming to rescue you. And once you accept that, you're free. Because when you stop waiting, you start moving. And when you move, you realize something powerful. The system didn't trap you. It trained you to trap yourself. And now the lock is open. But only you can walk out. Only you can choose authorship over obedience, power over passivity, conscious morality over convenient morality. You don't need to burn the world down. You just need to stop sacrificing yourself to it. You don't need to prove your worth. You need to own it. That's what they never taught you. Because once you do, you can't be controlled anymore. You become dangerous, not because you hurt others, but because you can no longer be manipulated through guilt, fear, or false promises. You become ungovernable, not to truth, but to illusion. And from that place, you don't just live, you lead. And that's where we go next. Now we reach the final threshold, the moment where clarity must become action. It's not enough to see the lie. You've already done that. You've peeled back the layers of illusion and stared into the machinery of power. You've recognized the false promise of moral labor, the trap disguised as virtue, but truth alone won't save you. Because every truth requires a translation into behavior, or it rots into bitterness. This is where most people fall. They wake up, they see it, they rage, they despair. But then they go back to the same desk, the same relationship, the same pattern. Because even a broken system feels safer than an unknown future. But safety is not the goal anymore. Your soul was not designed for sedation. It was designed for sovereignty. So what does that mean, practically, powerfully? It means you stop outsourcing your authority. No more asking, do they approve? You start asking, is this aligned with who I'm becoming? You stop trading time for titles. You trade it for impact. You stop building someone else's dream under the illusion of loyalty and start constructing your own with the clarity of purpose. And it begins always with ownership. Own your energy. Don't give it away for applause. Own your ambition. Don't suppress it to stay palatable. Own your voice. Don't shrink it to keep fragile systems intact. And most of all, own your boundaries. Because boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. And you get to decide who walks through them. This is strategic morality in motion. You're not abandoning your principles, you're wielding them. You're not becoming ruthless, you're becoming precise. When to say yes and when to walk away, when to serve and when to let it burn, when to speak and when to let your silence scream, this is no longer mine. And with every decision you stop asking, will this make them like me? And start asking, will this make me respect me? Because here's what Nietzsche knew, what few are ever willing to say out loud. The world is not waiting to hand you power. It's waiting to see if you're willing to claim it, and most aren't. Because claiming your power means giving up your excuses. It means releasing the story that says, they didn't recognize me, and replacing it with, I didn't require them to. It means walking into rooms without needing to be the nicest, most liked, most agreeable person there, and instead being the one with the clearest mission, the strongest center, and the least tolerance for games. It means remembering that morality without muscle is martyrdom, and power without principles is manipulation. But power with principles, that's leadership, not the kind they hand you. The kind you build, not the kind that comes with a title, the kind that radiates from every choice you make, quiet, grounded, undeniable. And that's what this has all been leading to. You didn't watch this to become bitter. You didn't wake up to start burning bridges and abandoning your values. You came here to reclaim them, to say, I am still moral, but not naive. I am still good, but I am no longer small. I still serve, but only in alignment with my strength, not in surrender to a system that exploits it. This is the real evolution. This is what Nietzsche meant when he said, Become who you are. Not the obedient version, the awake version. The version that doesn't wait to be chosen, but chooses. The version that doesn't hope for fairness, but builds leverage. The version that doesn't ask, am I doing enough? But asks, am I becoming someone who cannot be ignored? So let's anchor this down, right now, in real terms. If you're still waiting to be seen, stop. Start building something that proves your worth, to yourself. If you're still asking, well, when will they appreciate me? Stop. Start asking, why am I still trying to earn love in places that only understand exploitation? If you're still working overtime for people who would replace you in a week, walk. That's not loyalty, that's self-abandonment. The system won't change for you, but you can change the system you build around your life. And here's the beautiful twist. When you do, you inspire others to do the same. This is how revolutions start, not with riots, but with refusals. Refusals to stay small. Refusals to play the game you never agreed to. Refusals to be moralized into submission. One by one, people wake up. They stop waiting, they start becoming. And the world shifts. Not because the system gave permission, but because you stopped needing it. If this hit you, if this made something inside you stir, break, or finally come alive, don't let it fade. Like, comment, subscribe. Not just to support this message, but to anchor this movement. Because that's what this is now, not a video, a revolt of the moral, a return of the sovereign, and it begins with you. Now ask yourself, what part of your life needs to be rewritten? Because the pen is in your hand now, and for the first time, you're no longer writing for them, you're writing for you.